Have you ever stopped to think about how Cain, one of the first children of Adam and Eve, managed to find a wife and start his own family? If we consider that Adam and Eve were the only progenitors of humanity, this question raises a real mystery. After all, where were the other people so that Cain could marry and have descendants? In this video, we will explore the lesser-known pages of the Bible to discover who Cain's wife really was and reveal the existence of Adam and Eve's forgotten daughters. By delving into the scripture's subtleties, we will uncover fascinating clues that shed light on this ancient enigma and give us a new perspective on the earliest days of humanity. So, if you are passionate about biblical stories, historical curiosities, and love uncovering secrets of the past, this video is for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you won't miss any of our amazing narratives. The creation of Adam and Eve is one of the most important moments in biblical history, marking the beginning of humanity. According to the book of Genesis, God formed Adam from the dust of the ground and breathed life into his nostrils, giving him existence. Then, God created Eve from one of Adam's ribs, thus establishing the first marital union and beginning the human family. This creation not only initiated human life, but also established a special relationship between God and his creation. That bond was foundational for all the stories that would follow in the Bible. After creating Adam and Eve and starting their life in the Garden of Eden, the couple began having children, continuing the human family. Among these children were Cain and Abel, two brothers who grew up in a world still pure and perfect, but which would soon face its first challenges and conflicts. Cain, being the firstborn, took on significant responsibilities, while Abel distinguished himself by his devotion. Their relationship shows us the first lessons about love, jealousy, and redemption in human history. Cain became a farmer, diligently working the land, while Abel opted for raising sheep, caring meticulously for his flock. Over time, the two brothers decided to present offerings to God as a form of worship and gratitude. Cain brought the fruits of his agricultural labor, while Abel offered the best animals of his flock, presenting the fattest and most valuable portions of the sheep. Abel's offering stood out for its sincerity and excellence, reflecting his deep dedication to God. By contrast, God accepted Abel's offering, but not Cain's. Though the Bible does not explicitly explain why God accepted one and not the other, it is generally understood that attitude and the quality of the offering played crucial roles in this decision. Abel presented the best he had, demonstrating generosity and commitment, making his offering more meaningful. Meanwhile, Cain's offering did not show the same level of dedication, which may have influenced God's rejection. This distinction stirred intense feelings of discontent and frustration in Cain. The rejection hurt his self-esteem, turning his initial disappointment into anger and resentment toward Abel. God, perceiving Cain's turbulent emotions, warned him about the looming danger of his hatred. He told Cain that sin was crouching at the door, ready to devour him, and encouraged him to master his feelings before it was too late. This divine warning was meant to keep Cain from surrendering to evil, giving him the chance to reflect and change his behavior. Despite the warning, Cain, consumed by anger and shame, invited Abel to go with him to the field. Isolated and without anyone else around, the tension between the brothers intensified. Overpowered by his negative emotions, Cain lost control and attacked Abel, committing a brutal murder. This act of violence marked the first recorded death in human history, bringing a new dimension of sin and suffering to God's created world. After the murder, God confronted Cain and asked where Abel was. Trying to conceal his crime, Cain answered dismissively, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Cain's response showed his desire to escape the consequences of what he had done, as well as his lack of remorse and unwillingness to take responsibility for his act. God, knowing what had really happened, explained to Cain the consequences of his deed. He would be cursed and become a wanderer on the earth, unable to cultivate the ground that had once sustained him. Cain's curse was twofold. He would have to roam the land, and the earth would no longer yield the fruits it had so successfully produced before. The farming life Cain had known was now destroyed. Cain's reaction to God's curse revealed his anguish and fear for the future. Cain expressed his concern, saying he would be doomed to wander without purpose and protection. Fearing that someone might find him and kill him to avenge Abel's death. In response to this concern, God placed a mark on Cain. This mark served to protect him from anyone who might seek vengeance. Although the Bible does not describe details of the mark on Cain, it guaranteed that no one would kill him, despite his curse. After that conversation with God, Cain left the divine presence and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. The Bible mentions that Cain knew his wife, and they had a son named Enoch. However, it does not explain exactly how or with whom Cain got married. In verse 17, it simply states that Cain knew his wife, leading to the interpretation that other people already existed aside from Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. In Genesis 4:14, Cain says, "You have driven me from the land today, and I shall hide from your presence. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." This fear is intriguing because it implies there were other people living on earth, apart from his immediate family, enough to make Cain afraid of being found and punished. In the following verse, God answers, "Not so. Whoever kills Cain shall be punished sevenfold." To protect Cain, God placed a mark on him to ensure no one would kill him. This mark functioned as a form of divine protection, indicating that even under a curse, Cain was safeguarded against acts of vengeance. These details suggest that within the biblical narrative, the earth was likely populated by more people in addition to Adam, Eve, and their sons. Cain's concern and God's intervention indicate that other individuals existed in the surrounding area, forming a larger community. A less common interpretation proposes that, besides Adam and Eve's family, God might have created other human beings independently. Supporters of this theory argue that, to explain the rapid expansion of humanity described in the Bible, a significant number of people would have been needed, something hard to achieve with only Adam and Eve's children. This view attempts to align the biblical account with archaeological evidence that points to ancient, complex human communities. However, it is important to note that this interpretation is speculative and not directly supported by the biblical text. The Genesis story focuses primarily on Adam and Eve's family, without mentioning other human groups. Therefore, this idea remains a topic of debate among scholars and theologians. The most widely accepted interpretation is that Cain may have married one of his sisters or nieces. The Bible, in Genesis, does not specify that Adam and Eve had only Cain and Abel as children, suggesting that there were other sons and daughters not explicitly mentioned. Thus, Cain would have married someone within his own family, in accordance with the cultural practices and historical context of that time. Indeed, in Genesis 4:1, Eve declares that God gave her a man, referring to Cain. However, there is no similar declaration after Abel's birth, implying that other children might have been born in the meantime. This lack of explicit mention of other children leads some scholars and theologians to believe that Adam and Eve had additional offspring beyond Cain, Abel, and Seth. This idea is supported by Genesis 5:4, which says that Adam had other sons and daughters besides Seth. This indicates that Adam and Eve's family was bigger than the children who are named individually. Hence, the Bible does not confine Adam and Eve's family to just Cain, Abel, and Seth, allowing us to think there were more members in the family, thus facilitating the continuation of humanity. Without a wider population outside of Adam and Eve's family, marrying a sister or close relative would be a logical explanation for humanity's growth. At the time, marrying siblings or close relatives was viewed as necessary to populate the earth. This interpretation aligns with the unique circumstances presented in the Bible, which does not explicitly forbid sibling marriage in the earliest stages of human history. Furthermore, the Bible mentions other instances of marriages between close relatives in various parts of Scripture. For example, after the flood, Noah's children also had to marry each other in order to repopulate the earth, since there were no other people available. Another notable case is Abraham, who married Sarah, his half-sister. In Genesis 20:12, the Bible confirms that Abraham and Sarah shared the same father, making them half-siblings. At that time, marriages between close relatives, like half-siblings, were considered normal and sometimes necessary to maintain the family line. Isaac, Abraham's son, also adhered to this practice by marrying Rebekah, who was his first cousin. Marriages between cousins were common and reflected the cultural norms of ancient societies. Likewise, Jacob, Abraham's grandson, married his cousins Leah and Rachel. Though such marriages might seem unusual today, back then they were accepted and established customs within the cultural and historical context. It is important to note that the laws prohibiting marriage between close relatives, as described in the Mosaic Law, were instituted much later, about 2,500 years after Adam and Eve were created. These laws, given to Moses, introduced stricter ethical and social standards, reflecting evolving cultural norms and the need to safeguard genetic health and maintain social order in a more complex society. The biblical narrative frequently centers on main characters, such as Cain and Abel, and figures like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This focus sometimes results in the stories of Adam and Eve's other children and daughters getting less attention. Consequently, we have limited information about the lives and contributions of these members of humanity's first family, despite their significant role in shaping human history. This approach creates gaps in our understanding of the experiences and destinies of the other family members, whose lives also played essential parts in building the world as we know it. Even though they are not mentioned in detail, these sons and daughters were crucial to the expansion and development of the earliest human communities. Although Genesis 5:4 mentions that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters besides Cain and Abel. The absence of specific names for these daughters means their stories remain in the background, anonymous. Meanwhile, Cain and Abel take center stage in the biblical narrative. However, it's understandable that the Bible cannot provide details about every character's life, given that it covers a vast range of events, from the creation of the world to the end of time, all in one single book. To fill these gaps, secondary writings such as the Book of Jubilees emerged. Though it is not widely recognized and is considered apocryphal, meaning it is not part of the official Jewish or Christian biblical canon, it offers an alternative source that explores details about lesser-known figures, including Adam and Eve's daughters. These forgotten characters provide a broader perspective on the descent of humanity's first family, despite not being regarded as sacred scripture in the main religious traditions because of the lack of consensus about its authorship and origin. The Book of Jubilees holds historical relevance. It provides an in-depth interpretation of the events narrated in Genesis, especially those concerning creation, Adam and Eve, and other Old Testament figures. This apocryphal book mentions the names of Adam and Eve's daughters and describes their lives, thus broadening our grasp of biblical history. This additional narrative is particularly significant for some Jewish and Christian communities who seek more information about key Old Testament events. In the Book of Jubilees, we find the names Awan and Azurah, identified as the wives of Cain and Seth, respectively. Although these names do not appear in the Bible, they are mentioned in apocryphal texts like the Book of Jubilees. The etymology of these names, linked to Hebrew or Phoenician, suggests meanings such as vigor or strength, symbolizing the influence of these women in sustaining the lineage started by Cain, Adam and Eve's firstborn. After being exiled, Cain encountered Awan and, according to the biblical narrative, founded the city of Enoch in honor of his son. The Book of Jubilees also refers to Enoch as one of Cain's desires or aspirations, following the tragic murder of Abel. Together with Cain, Awan becomes a central figure in the genealogy, playing an essential role in events that took place following Cain's exile. Though the Bible does not mention Cain's wife or her origins up to the point of Cain's exile, Genesis names only a few individuals: Adam, Eve, Abel, and Seth. Yet it is likely that the land was already populated when Cain joined with Awan, suggesting other people existed beyond those few individuals. It's probable that more than 5 people existed at that time, including other women besides Eve. Some theories suggest that Cain's wife might have been his niece, Seth's daughter, considering the long period between Cain's exile in the land of Nod and his encounter with Awan. Certain theologians estimate that this interval lasted about 300 years, during which Adam's children could have surpassed 50 and Seth's could have exceeded 20. Another fascinating aspect of the earliest biblical generations is the remarkable longevity of the antediluvian people. Characters like Adam, who lived 930 years, Seth with 912, Enosh with 905, and Methuselah, Noah's grandfather, with 969 years, challenge modern notions of human lifespan. These extended lifespans, recorded in the genealogies of Genesis, indicate that in humanity's earliest days, living for centuries was commonplace. Various theories have tried to explain this exceptional longevity. One theory suggests that primordial conditions were perfect, with ideal climates and atmospheres that favored a longer life. Earth's atmosphere before the flood might have afforded extra protection against harmful radiation and other aging factors. Another theory proposes that the genetics of the first humans were more robust, allowing for prolonged lifespans. Additionally, some biblical interpretations propose defined changes or modifications to natural laws after the flood. In Genesis 6:3, God declares that His Spirit will not contend with mankind forever because they are mortal, establishing that human days would be limited to 120 years. This may imply a planned reduction in human lifespan after the flood, reflected in the gradual decline in life expectancies in subsequent generations. For instance, Abraham lived 175 years, Genesis 25:7, and Moses, one of the most prominent Old Testament figures, lived 120 years, Deuteronomy 34. This progressive shortening may be attributed to various changes. A common explanation is that the environmental conditions following the flood significantly impacted human longevity. Another possible factor is the gradual decline in genetic quality among subsequent generations due to marriages between close relatives. Before the population grew, such marriages were frequent and necessary to continue the species from a limited number of individuals. However, as the population expanded, these practices were forbidden to prevent genetic and health problems arising from inbreeding. The reduction in lifespans might also reflect adjustments in God's plans for humanity. Some scholars believe that God recalibrated the human lifespan to fit the new realities of the post-flood world, where extremely long lives were no longer needed. The Bible reinforces the idea that the entire human race descends from Adam and Eve, as mentioned in Genesis 17:26, affirming that from one man came all nations of the earth, setting times and boundaries for human habitation on earth. This story helps us understand how humanity's first family grew. Cain, Abel's brother, needed to find a wife in order to have children. Since Adam and Eve were the first parents, it's likely Cain married one of his sisters, or another sister or brother they had. Besides Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve had other daughters who are not mentioned in the Bible, but who also contributed to the family's growth. These daughters were important in forming new families and spreading humanity across the earth. At that time, people lived much longer than they do now. Adam lived 930 years. Seth lived 912, and others also lived for centuries, which allowed the family to grow quickly. After certain important events, such as the flood, the rules about marriage changed. Initially, marriage between siblings or close relatives was necessary to grow the population, but later these practices were forbidden to maintain health and order in society. This story shows us how the human family began and grew, starting with Adam and Eve. Even with so few people at the start, they managed to form a large family that spread out over the world. It's a story that helps us understand our origins and how important families are to humanity. I'm leaving 2 special videos for you here at the end. In one, I talk about Job's suffering when he lost everything he had achieved in his life, and in the other, I explain how the terrible plagues struck Egypt. I'm sure you'll enjoy them, so go check them out. If you like this story and want to learn more about the adventures and mysteries of the Bible, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos. Bless this video with your like. Jesus loves you. Thank you very much.